did I think in my lifetime there would be a new release under the name Pink Floyd, the greatest band of the 70s, the progressive rock kings. After the split of Waters, the keyboardist Rick Wright's death, and even Storm Ferguson, the designer of most of their album covers, his death as well, it felt as if Pink Floyd were firmly lost in the past, gone but not forgotten, their legacy living on, but that the band name was put to bed in eternal slumber. Though on November 10th, 2014, the giant of rock music has been awoken one final time with The Endless River, which will be the last Pink Floyd album to ever grace our eardrums. When it was announced at first, and I heard there was going to be new Pink Floyd, of course I was elated. Pink Floyd, one of my favourite bands, The Wall's my second favourite album ever, Dark Side of the Moon, my fourth, and both Wish You Were Here and Animals in my top 50. I mean, they've created some of the greatest music that man has ever done, and now they're back. But the giddiness soon wore off as I began to read more in depth about the album. Of course, Waters was not involved, that's hardly a huge surprise, but also the fact that the album is largely instrumental and based off tracks recorded in the Division Bell sessions and just reworked. In fact, only one track actually features lead vocals, and the only positive I could see to this coming into it was the posthumous contribution of Rick Wright, as this album is a tribute to him. Including many keyboard parts that he did record. To be quite honest, my excitement had all but evaporated before this release. A momentary lapse of reason, Division Bell were two of Pink Floyd's weakest studio efforts in my personal opinion. I've tried to like them many times, listened to them loads, but I can't get into them in the same way that I like the Barrett and Gilmour up to the Wall albums. To me, they just didn't really go anywhere, combining Dave's love of new age, noodling and meandering prog that just felt rather iterative and a shadow of Floyd's innovative self. Still, I thought that songs like Dogs of War and High Hopes were great, but the rest really just left me cold. So, how is The Endless River? Is this the swan song we wanted, or is this just a disappointing footnote at the end of one of rap music's most illustrious careers? Well, one of the first things to bear in mind about this album is that it's split into four main parts, pretty much by the vinyl version of the album, I would say, with each side of the record really being a slightly different suite of music. Now, let's make one thing clear from the outset, that if you listen to this, you must listen to this in its entirety. This is not one that you just had to pick a couple of songs that you like name from, or pick the single. Just don't. Just listen to it in its entirety and give it your full concentration. Don't put it on in the background. This is one you need to sit down to and dedicate 50 minutes of your life to if you want to try and remotely understand this album. So, first we look at the first side of the album, the first sort of suite. And it begins with Things Left Unsaid. And Floyd's love of sampling voices saying various things is shown, which of course is shown brilliantly on Dark Side of the Moon. And they decide to open up the album in this vein with someone saying, we are certainly on an unspoken understanding, but there are a lot of things left unsaid as well. And I really find this to be quite an effective introduction to a final Floyd album. It's a summation of the tenuous relationships between the band members at various points in the band's tumultuous history. Though the rest of the song really kind of fails to deliver on the profound setup, and instead more paves the way for It's What We Do, with the strong message that, well, the band has just always done what they wanted to, and simply nothing else, that they are Pink Floyd, and that their very special collective vision shaped the musical landscape, and no one can take that away from them. But this track, this just feels rather too sparse. The simple echoing melodies of Wright, the basic mellow drums of Mason, and the emotionally wailing, note-perfect voice of Gilmour's majestic guitar. It sounds good on paper, but really I find the lack of substance and depth, just in comparison with Floyd's classic works, demonstrates as a whole really why Wright's active contributions to albums and Waters' absence really left Pink Floyd as a shadow of their former self, as they simply ebbed and flowed on Momentary Lapse of Reason and Division Bell. This, it's nothing memorable. It provides an excellent backdrop to some contemplative thought, but it does nothing more. Side 2 is definitely my favourite on the album, with Some, Skins, Unsung and Anisina presenting one of the only memorable crescendos present on this entire album. Even if the build-up of Some, with its gently sawing guitars and beautiful organ and strong drum fills, are offset by the follow-up Skins that really is nothing but a drum solo and an uninteresting Mason drum solo at that. Look, I have nothing against Mason per se, but he wasn't the most creative member of Pink Floyd, let's be real here. And a track of him soloing for a couple of minutes is really not that exciting. He was capable of some really cool drum fills, but this track he doesn't do anything really that interesting. It's really what's the highlight of this part is Unsung going into Anisina, which Anisina really is the single best track on the album in my opinion. And Unsung serves as a lovely intro with bird-like screeches emanating from the guitar as Anisina comes in, feeling like something from Dark Side of the Moon with that piano melody, definitely reminiscent of something like Us and Them. But what really sets it apart, except from the other tracks on the album, aside from the atmospheric inspiration from Dark Side, is the tremendous build-up and the saxophone solo, the slide guitar and the quiet of R's, creating a punch, a depth, a sense of direction on what is largely an ambient, directionless, free-flowing landscape. Here, the emotional wail of the slide guitars channeled into something very, very powerful, quite brilliant and exceedingly beautiful. Though, I just can't help but feel that this could have been an all-time classic for Floyd if they added a vocal verse or two. Side 3 is definitely home to probably the worst titled Pink Floyd track in their history, On Noodle Street. What on earth was Gilmour thinking of that name? On Noodle Street. Dear God, Gilmour. Just awful name. I mean, this is probably my least favourite side of the album. And the side that I like to nickname the bundle of intros, because many of the songs on this track, to me, certainly, feel like they would have made some darn good intros or maybe bridges for Pink Floyd songs, but on their own feel, well, dull. They meander around on Noodle Street with seemingly no direction home into the complete unknown. I mean, there is a ray of hope on this side, though, with allons-y 1 and 2. They kind of sound like Run Like Hell in terms of vibes. And guess what? They would have made great intros to Pink Floyd songs, shockingly enough. Okay, yeah, something like Autumn 68, which is Rick Wright playing an organ solo, I think maybe the Royal Albert Hall, something like that, probably in 68, and a reference to Summer 68 on, can't remember the album now, but Summer 68, definitely. And, you know, I love Rick Wright. I'm a big fan of his work with Floyd and see him very much as a crucial member. But this piece just feels like an old, well, portion of an old recording that Dave's tried to force into a song, and really, it is. And then on side 3 we also have the bizarre Talkin Hawkin. And as much as I love Mr. Stephen Hawking, I mean, I really do. A Brief History of Time is a wonderful book if you have an interest in theoretical physics or astrophysics. But that does not mean that I need him in my Pink Floyd. Just like my love for pizza and lemons, some things are better kept separate. So now on side 4, you're going to get rewarded for your patience down this fairly slow-going river with a track that has Gilmour vocals. Yay, but first more ambience. Calling is a great example of ambience that does nothing. Again, it make a cracking intro to a song. Oh no, in fact, it make a cracking intro to an album. You have this as track 1, then come straight in on the back of it with a killer, atmospheric, powerful, dark, complex prog song, and you're onto a winner. Now, Pink Floyd don't do that. They instead follow it up with the musical wanderings of Eyes to Pearls and Surfacing. To be honest, let's just skip ahead and let's just get to the meat of this, which is Louder Than Words, the final Pink Floyd song taking over from the job of High Hopes from the Division Bell. And I mean, the High Hopes did pretty damn well as a swan song of the band's long gone. Louder Than Words, though, I mean, it's definitely an interesting replacement. It certainly highlights Polly Samson's lyrics far more, I would argue, than it highlights Floyd's unrivaled compositional skill. The poignant refrain of this thing we do as they tell the struggle that the band has been through, but after all the bitching and bickering, all that's left is the music, which is louder, more provocative than anything that could be said of the dissing between individual members. Then musically, I found this a little anticlimactic at the end of the album. Really, all in all, it's fairly standard post-Waters affair that I'm not much of a fan of. But yeah, it's still also kind of a fitting end to the band. I mean, it doesn't exceed high hopes, I would argue, but it's an adequate substitute, so I can't complain all that much about it. It's certainly probably the second best song on the album. But the real question at the end of this album is, does it need to be made? Did Pink Floyd need the adrenaline shot to the heart, or should they just have been left stone dead? To me, this is not the finale that Pink Floyd deserved. This is not a great representation of one of rock's greatest careers. This is not the comeback album that David Bowie's Next Day or Black Sabbath's 13 were in 2013. Instead, this feels like a bonus disc of touched-up material that might have belonged on a super deluxe version of Division Bell, more for hardcore fans only, and I mean hardcore fans of post-Waters only, rather than a full $8.99 retail release. Though still they convey beauty throughout this journey. And as a Floyd fan, it's not a journey I could possibly dislike. But, I mean, on the one hand, I'm pleased I made the journey. On the other, I just hoped it'd be so much more. I'm going to give this album a 6 out of 10. All in all, Pink Floyd here is the same in a relative way, but they're older. Shorter of breath and one day closer to death. The time is over, the band is gone, and really, I hope they had something more to say. This has been TheAIbumMan. Thanks for watching. Comment, subscribe, and as usual, long live rock and roll.